You're listening to Himalayan Adventure by Evan Vale. Chapter 6.
At about the same time, the trio of North Korean super soldiers was getting out of a taxi at a location that was a little over 2 kilometers from Kathmandu University. They had decided to stop there to ensure that the taxi driver would not later connect them with the crime they were about to commit. After the taxi departed, they set off on the long walk. The sliver of moon high above only served to cast their faces in a pale white light and did little to banish the shadows all around them. Maine, with his phobia of the dark, glanced around fearfully and shivered. Rummaging around in his backpack, he pulled out a torch and flicked it on. Mohawk's and Flattop's faces looked like gargoyles in the narrow beam of yellow light. Flattop looked at his brother sympathetically. "You can use the torch until we get to the grounds of the university," he said, "but after that you'll have to switch it off." Maine swallowed the lump in his throat. "What about if I cover the bulb with my hand?" he asked. Flattop shook his head and replied one of the guards might see. He assumed there would be at least some guards at the university, and that would give the game away, he said. Mohawk patted his brother on the shoulder encouragingly. "When we get into the university building, we'll switch on the lights," he added. "Really?" Maine asked hopefully. "If there are no guards around," replied Mohawk. They arrived at the bottom of a long winding road that led up a hill to the university. They stashed their backpacks under some bushes. Flattop handed them each a black ski mask. Their silver hair was resplendent in the moonlight and far too visible for any covert operation. The GXs slipped the masks over their faces and positioned them comfortably. Only their black eyes were visible, blinking slowly in the torchlight. Maine hesitated, then switched off his torch. Kathmandu University had little in the way of security. The grounds were poorly lit, and there were plenty of places to blend into the shadows. Flattop saw no video cameras mounted on the exterior of the buildings and only one guard, who sauntered along looking at the bright display of a mobile phone. One of the maps on public display pointed them towards the science faculty, and when they arrived at the correct building, Flattop tried the door. It was locked, but not problematically so. Mohawk and Maine stood guard while Flattop picked the lock and slipped inside the building. The other two followed him in, and when the door was closed, Flattop found a light switch and flicked it on, just like he had promised Maine he would. The lights might have attracted any guards, but the GXs would deal with that problem if and when it arose. Taking off his ski mask, Maine took a deep breath, blinked in the bright light, and sighed in relief. Moving from door to door, they made their way down the corridor looking for Nikki Zipster's office. None of the GXs could read very well. Their North Korean masters had decided that reading was not a useful skill for a prototype super soldier, so they had to pause at the name plaque on each office door and sound out the letters carefully. 10 minutes later, they came to a small sign, and Mohawk spelt aloud, slowly and hesitantly, "Professor Nikki Zipster." Turning to his brothers, he said, "This must be the one." Maine stared at the piece of paper stuck to the door below the name plaque. "What does that say?" he asked. They all gathered around, frowning in intense concentration. Mohawk was the first to finish. He read out the following message slowly: "Gone trekking in Langtang National Park." "Be back on the 15th, he declared, sounding out the letters carefully. "Where's Langtang National Park?" asked Maine. "Somewhere in the Himalayas, I think," Flattop said. He checked his wristwatch. "But the 15th was 4 days ago." "Do you think Zipster hasn't come back yet? She might have returned to Kathmandu but forgotten to take the sign off her office door," Mohawk suggested. Flattop agreed that it was possible. With one huge hand, he reached out and tried the door handle. Locked. He leaned his body weight against the door until the frame cracked and the door swung slowly open. "No point wasting my time picking this little lock," he said with a grin. There was a small pile of mail on the floor that had been slipped underneath the door. Flattop saw a handful of envelopes addressed to Nikki Zipster before they disappeared beneath his huge black hiking boot. He flicked the light on, and his brothers followed him in. Zipster's office was very neat, and it occurred to Mohawk that if the Yeti tooth was in there, it shouldn't be too difficult to find. The GXs separated and began a thorough search of the room, beginning with the drawers, closets, and desktop. They were trained in brute force, and that was the manner in which they went about their business now. Mohawk tore the drawers from the desk and appended their contents on the carpet. Maine pushed all of the books on the shelves onto the floor and ferreted around. Flattop ripped everything out of the closet one item at a time, examined it, then dumped it on the floor. Mohawk didn't find the Yeti tooth, but he did chance across an MP3 player with its earphones plugged in. He wasn't sure what the device was, but he had seen some of the guards in North Korea put earphones in their ears, so he quickly surmised its purpose. Taking off his ski mask, he fitted the earphones into his small, gorilla-like ears and began pressing buttons on the MP3 with his meaty thumb. The digital display lit up, and though he wasn't sure how to operate the device, he managed to find the playlist and activate one of the songs. He jumped in surprise when the music blared through the earphones at maximum volume, and he furiously pressed buttons to turn the sound down. Flat Top came over. Like Mohawk and Mane, he had removed his ski mask. "Have you found the Yeti tooth?" he asked, but Mohawk was looking the other way, and with the earphones in his ears, he didn't realize his brother had asked him a question. Flat Top tapped Mohawk on the shoulder and asked him the same question again. Mohawk took the earphones out of his ears and replied, "No, but I found this device. It plays music like we heard on the plane." Flat Top examined the MP3 player and then handed it back to Mohawk. "It's of no use to us," he stated in a matter-of-fact voice. "It doesn't matter, I found it and I'm going to keep it," Mohawk said. "How does it help our mission objective?" Flat Top asked. "I like it," Mohawk replied with a shrug. "What does it matter if I keep it?" Then he put the earphones back in his ears and continued to search for the tooth. Meanwhile, Mane had discovered a sophisticated digital camera with a telephoto lens. After switching it on, he panned around the office, sighting through the viewfinder and adjusting the focus. It didn't take him long to work out how to take photographs, and he managed to snap a picture of Flat Top rolling his eyes at Mohawk. When Flat Top saw him, he came over. "You're supposed to be looking for the Yeti tooth," he stated. Mane continued to point the camera at various objects in the office and take photographs of them. "I know," he said. "But I found this camera and I think it has some photographs of Zipster in it. Look." He thumbed several buttons next to the LCD screen and scrolled through a series of pictures of a woman wearing a blue jacket and standing against various mountainous backgrounds. "Might be useful if we need to find her," Mane explained. He didn't mention that he was also having a lot of fun taking pictures with it. Flat Top grunted in agreement. "Okay, but keep looking for the tooth," he added. Mane nodded, slotted the camera back into its protective case, and hung it around his neck on its cord. He was well aware of his mission objective, but he quietly hoped that neither of his brothers found the Yeti tooth that they were searching for. Finding the tooth meant their mission was over, and when that happened, their orders were to go straight back to North Korea. Mane was a soldier and trained to follow orders to the letter, but he had been deeply affected by the first taste of freedom that came when he stepped off the plane at Tribhuvan Airport. His first look at the distant, icy peaks of the Himalayas was a moment that he would never, ever forget. He had no desire to return to the rigid and restrictive military facility that was his home, and if the mission to find the Yeti tooth took longer than expected, and he had to spend more time traveling around Nepal experiencing its stunningly beautiful vistas, he was fine with that. But there was no way he would tell anybody else how he felt, and especially not his brothers. They were all trained to be soldiers, tough as nails and fearless. Their first priority was to complete the mission and to follow the orders of the Grand Marshal. It didn't matter what the mission was. If they were required to storm the enemy's headquarters and kill the commanding officer, they would do it. If they were instructed to lie in a hole for 60 days to ambush the enemy, they would do it. If they were ordered to descend into an active volcano to collect a cup of molten lava, they would do it, and no questions asked. Mane knew that he was part of the North Korean military machine, and so his personal desires were irrelevant. He didn't get to choose, and he was never asked what he wanted. He was forbidden to show fear, because fear was the worst form of weakness. His strict military training had all but driven the fear from him, except of course for his fear of the dark. He was deeply ashamed of that, and he strove to be a perfect soldier in all other respects. And he had been, until the moment he realized that he didn't want to go back to North Korea. He wondered what Mohawk or Flat Top would say if he told them how he felt. They would probably laugh at him. What kind of soldier refuses to follow orders, enjoys staring at mountain tops at sunset? Pathetic, tough as nails, tough as fingernails, more like it. No, he would definitely lose his brother's respect if he told them how he felt. As he searched through one of the filing cabinets for the Yeti tooth, he thought about his situation and became more certain of his conclusions. His brothers probably didn't feel the way he did and wouldn't understand. He would have to keep his feelings to himself. Slamming the filing cabinet door closed, he opened the next one and started searching. Soon the office was in disarray, with papers, magazines, and books strewn across the carpet, boxes torn apart, and the locked drawers in the desk ripped open. When the last space in which the Yeti tooth could be hidden had been investigated, the GXs stood in the middle of the mess and considered their options. "It's not here," Flat Top said. He sounded neither surprised nor disappointed. It was just a statement of fact. Maine was quietly relieved that his brothers had not found the tooth in the closing minutes of the search. "It might be in one of the other offices in this building," he replied, keeping his voice devoid of emotion like Flat Top. "There are too many offices to search now," Mohawk said. "And we can't keep returning night after night because after a while the university will put on more guards." Flat Top considered this reply. "We can take out the guards," he suggested. "And what do we do when the police turn up?" asked Mohawk. Flat Top shrugged and said, "Take them out too. You're not afraid of a few puny police, are you?" "Our orders are to find the tooth as quietly as possible," Mohawk said. "If we get into a fight with the local police, we will blow our cover." "It's not very good cover anyway," Flat Top grumbled. "Do you think people actually believe that we are in a South Korean rock band?" "Not really, no," Mohawk replied. "We should think up new cover stories later. But the point is, if we get into a tussle with the cops, we'll draw too much attention to ourselves and it may affect our ability to complete our mission." "I agree," Maine said. "Our next best option is to locate Nikki Zipster and get her to tell us where the tooth is. Judging by the pile of mail waiting for her at the door, I'd say she hasn't come back yet," Flat Top said. "If the sign on the door is right, she was supposed to be back 4 days ago," Maine added. Flat Top was still convinced that his idea to search the university and deal with the guards and police was the best one. "That's going to make finding her a little difficult," he said. Maine ignored him. "We can either wait here in Kathmandu for her to return or go and find her," he stated. "We know she is in Langtang National Park, so that will help us narrow our search," Mohawk said. "But that would mean deviating from our orders," argued Flat Top, "and we're not authorized." "Right," said Maine. "I think we should contact North Korea immediately for further instructions." Mohawk nodded in agreement and looked at Flat Top. The giant GX with the military haircut angrily kicked a pile of magazines across the room and watched the shreds of paper slowly flutter to the carpet. Then he sighed and said, "Oh, all right." They all donned their ski masks and headed for the door. Flat Top switched off the office light, and because there were no guards in the corridor, Maine was allowed to switch on his torch. After hurrying through the carpeted hallways of the building, they exited through the same door that Flat Top had picked the lock on, then escaped into the night, with Maine clutching the digital camera in one huge hand and the MP3 player tucked into Mohawk's trouser pocket. By the time the guards stumbled across the damage to Nikki Zipster's office, the GXs were long gone.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.